So I'm Mark Bredner from Yoga Coach. Today we're going to talk about breath coach training. And, we run a number of programs, a number of 50-hour trainings, mind coach, prana coach, breath coach. We're going to talk about the difference between prana coach and breath coach. We run, yoga as a life coaching system. And we look at really how we can take yoga and apply it, all of these incredible teachings of the yogis, and apply it to modern day living. If you have any questions, please pop them in the chat and Christina will keep a little record of them, and we'll check in every so often and answer any of your questions. This training starts next weekend. They go for 3 weekends. It's basically 3 sessions each day. We do a practice for an hour. We have a little gap. We do 2 hours of theory, have a little gap, and then we do a Q&A session each day for 6 days. I've been doing yoga my whole life. I've been teaching for over 40 years. I've been educating teachers this is my 27th year of educating teachers. Spent a lot of time in India with my master teachers, gurus, looking at the deeper spiritual aspects of yoga and how we can apply it to life. When we look at breath coach, or anything that we want to teach, we want to look at it as a holistic system. And of course, one of the amazing things about yoga is it is a holistic system. It's practical, it's pragmatic. It includes all aspects of what it is to be a human being and how to live in an optimal way. It addresses our relationships to the world, our relationship to ourselves, our physical body, our breath and nervous system, our senses, and our mind at all different levels, and ultimately consciousness and spirituality. So when we want to teach something, we want to do it from all levels. And we do that in breath coach. We do it in everything that we do, but in breath coach, we want to do it on the level of the physical. We want to do it on the level of the inner energies. We want to be able to do it on the level of mental, emotional, and also consciousness and spirit. Let's start with the physical. So if we start at the physical, well, the first part of the training is we're looking at the anatomy of breathing. We're looking at the lungs, we're looking at the muscles of breathing, we're looking at the mouth, the nostrils, we're looking at the sinus cavity, all these different aspects, and how we can work with it to make it our breathing more effective and efficient. On a physical level, we're looking at the exchange of the 2 main gases, oxygen and carbon dioxide, and how by influencing those 2 gases, it can affect our health and our energy utilization. Super important. We also look at the shape of the jaw and how the shape of the jaw impacts our palate and how that impacts the sinuses and the sinus cavity. And again, how that impacts our health and our vitality and how we might improve that. Also, how we eat, how we masticate our food, what we eat, how we eat it, and how that also affects the shape of the jaw. And then again, to the palate, to the nasal cavity, and our health and our vitality. We look at it on all those levels. Then when we come into the subtle body, we're looking at, when we breathe, we're not just breathing in oxygen. The oxygen carries the prana, the chi, the ki, the spirit, the bioenergy. Let's just take all of that and call it electricity. That, when we breathe in, there's another subtle anatomy that absorbs the prana, and we'll look at that subtle anatomy. And that's what activates us and switches us on. That's what makes us alive. And we're going to look at the prana and the subtle anatomy. So we have 2 little kind of aspects at the back of the nose that absorbs the prana and puts it into polarity, into Ida and Pingala, yin and yang. And what that does is allows us as spiritual beings in a physical body to operate in the world of opposites and diversity. In other words, it allows us to have experiences. In other words, it allows us to have experiences so that we can evolve and grow. This is how we do it. And we want to evolve and grow back into yoga, to yoke, back into singularity. So when we talk about the singularity, we always go from the one. Singularity we call Brahman. Another system might call it God, you might call it the Tao. And then the one always goes to the two. So we live in a world of duality. We have these experiences, and then our consciousness gets hijacked by the mind and the senses. We go out and engage in these experiences, it gets hijacked, and we get identified with the world, and we kind of get lost out there. So what we're trying to do is bring our senses back in, to centralize our prana, to balance it, to centralize it, and bring it back up into Anjana, and this whole process of coming back into singularity. So with the consciousness and the singularity, we want to start looking at the nadis. Now, there's 72,000 nadis from the yoga science, and that feeds electricity, the prana, to all the cells in the body. Now, all the cells in the body are programmed to do their thing. And if we shut down on any of those pathways, then the electricity, the full current, is not getting to the cells. Then the cell can't do its thing. So that part of the body will start to become inefficient. It will start to dysfunction, and we get illness, disease. Eventually, the cells will attack each other, and that's what we call cancer. There's no electricity getting to them. So with Breath Coach, we'd also look at supporting, opening up that energetic system through asana. It's one of the roles of it. We want to do all these different templates and shapes to open up the physical body, to open up all the pathways we've closed down, and then we use the breath, the different pranayama techniques, to channel and direct prana to certain parts of the body. We also direct and channel prana to create certain states of consciousness. When we look at pranayama, we're doing it to extend the life force. So when the yogic breathing practices are designed to work on life force, and they're designed to help elevate our consciousness. Because when you look at the system of yoga, if you look at the classic system of the Ashtanga 8 limbs, the end point is samadhi. So the end point is the singularity, where the individual self merges back with universal self. The two becomes the one. The subject and the object merge. And so when we do our pranayama, it's part of a complete system, of an 8-limb system, to help us get back to singularity. Whereas a lot of the modern breathing practices are designed to get emotional release. And then we can come back and look at breathing practices from the science perspective. Well, they're working on the different gases, oxygen, carbon dioxide, to help us improve our health and vitality. And we'll look at those questions in a sec. So those questions come back to, well, do I inhale more or do I exhale more? Do I breathe more or do I breathe less? And when I talk about more, I mean volume. What do we do with these things? Yeah. And what are these different systems trying to achieve? And oftentimes their focus is different. So when we look at pranayama, it's to extend the life force. We have 4 main nadis. We have Brahma Nadi, which is our connection back into singularity. From there, we have Sushumna Nadi, which is on the physical level, our brain and spinal cord. And then we have Idam Pingala, which is sympathetic, parasympathetic, which allows us to operate in duality. So it's very cool. And we use Kriya to upscale and ramp up and direct working with the consciousness and those sorts of things to get that all happening. Then when you look at it from the mental emotional perspective, it's really quite simple, because the breath and the mind are linked together. And if your breath is disturbed, your mind will be disturbed. If your breath is serene and calm, the mind will be in that direction. So we can do different breathing practices to influence that. And so it's very simple in that way. And We also use the breath to balance the nervous system, the left and right, to help us get centered in our life. And we also look at the moon, sun, fire in the science when we're looking at breathing. So the moon is practices that focus on calming the system down. They focus on balancing the nervous system. They focus on quietening everything, lengthening the exhale, about connecting, balancing and connecting to the parasympathetic nervous system so that we can quieten down and we can still. If you like, yin yoga is in that direction. Because when we still everything down, the mind comes forward, the psychology, and we can set aside what doesn't serve us. Then we can do the sun and we can do breathing practices that build prana. But you can't do that if you've got disturbances, because if you put energy into a system with disturbances, it's going to feed the disturbance. So we want to remove those, build prana, and then eventually we're going to use the fire to illuminate. And that leads us into the spiritual practice, because essentially what we're trying to do in the system of yoga is rise above the material and tap into the invisible energies of life, to tap into the spiritual. And the way we do that is by raising our vibration. Because even science tells us what the yogis have been telling us for thousands of years, everything is energy. And we want to come to that energy that's more subtle. We want to become more subtle human beings by raising our vibration. And when we raise our vibration, we raise and raise and raise it until eventually that individual self merges with the universal self, and we get singularity. We become the realized yogi. But we can notice the benefits and the journey along the way and how useful it is. You know, with Breath Coach, it's important not to just teach pranayama. You know, you need to understand the whole system. You need to understand the anatomy of breathing, the exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen. I mean, the yogis were teaching us to breathe less volume. And why they did that is so that carbon dioxide increases. But then we go, isn't carbon dioxide a residue or a toxin we need to get rid of the body? Isn't carbon dioxide go into the atmosphere? Don't we have to do all this stuff? Don't we have to reverse all this? Don't we have to stop cow farts and all this stuff? So why do they get us to do that? Well, there's a whole science behind that of building tolerance to carbon dioxide with less volume in our breath, so that the hemoglobin releases the oxygen into the cells, to the mitochondria. That multitudes increases our energy utilization, and there's a whole science behind that. So we're going to look at all those aspects. Yeah, and that's what I've got to say at the moment. We basically do it over 3 weekends. The first weekend we'll do more the physical. The second weekend we work with the inner energies and mind, and the last week we work with spiritual and consciousness. It's designed so that it's totally science-backed. It's designed so that it's applicable in a user-friendly, easy to understand way that you can teach to your students. It's certified with Yoga Alliance, 50-hour, continuing education credits. Yeah, I've worked with Olympic athletes with all levels of this to get great results. Work with world champions in swimming and surfing to definitely increase their performance. I think one of the things to really pay attention to is that, there's breath stuff's a trend at the moment. It has waves of being a trend. In the 80s, there was a big trend around rebirthing. At the moment, there's a big trend around, holotropic breathing and what's the other one called? Another name for it as well. Where the focus is on over breathing. Now, the yogis always emphasized less breathing. So be aware of that. We're going to talk about that and go deep into understanding those things. But a lot of the over breathing stuff is for emotional release, where the under breathing is to enhance your health and increase your lifespan. It's self-paced learning. All of the classes are recorded, so you can go through at your own time. All of the practices that we do are in a practice library. So if you can't attend all the sessions, you don't miss anything. It's all there. Every practice that we do is in a library. You have access to it for life. Any sessions you miss, we have a Facebook group where you can ask questions and I will answer those questions for you, either separately in there or in the following weekend when we do our Q&A sessions. So I hope to see you there. Big love. Namaste. Over and out.